Edwige Danticat, one of Miami's favorite writers, one of America's favorite writers. The new book is Claire of the Sea Light. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Congratulations on the reception of Claire. I saw the long line to get into your reading, and you've gotten fantastic reviews, as you pretty much always do. But for those who may not know, tell us about Claire.
Well, Claire is sort of a hybrid between short stories and a novel, and it's about really a small town, coastal fishing village called Ville Rose, and but at the center of it is a little girl named Claire who goes missing one night, and then through her story, we meet all these different characters in the book.
Uh-huh. Now, you primarily write about Haiti and Haitian characters. And yet you've struck a chord with all kinds of readers. Why do you think that is? You're writing about your experience and the experience of your people and the immigrant experience, and yet how is it, do you think, that you have been able to reach so many readers and become so popular, for a serious writer, so popular?
Well, I think there are two factors to that. I think there are probably some universal experiences that cut across, I think, cultural boundaries. At this book fair, Amy Tan was here today, and I remember reading Amy Tan when I was in, the beginning of my college years, and I thought, this is my story. Even though the characters were Chinese American, there was something about it that seemed very much like that mother-daughter relationship, and all these other things that really echoed something in my experience. So I think there are things that we have, that as human beings, that people have in common. So that's why we can still read Sophocles today, and we could read other writers who are not even in our period of time. So I think those things strike a chord. But in terms of, but I think I had a really big breakthrough when in 1998, Breath Ice Memory, my first book, was chosen for the Oprah Winfrey's book club. I think that also added a lot to sort of the broadening the audience that I've had until that point.
But Oprah chose many people, and they all got a lot of attention for that one book, but not many of them have been able to sustain the popularity the way that you have, especially since you are a literary writer. You write whatever you want to write. I can tell by reading you that you don't try to write to fulfill anyone's expectations. For one thing, your books are not all the same. Where did you get the inspiration for Claire herself?
Well, Claire came after I was watching a documentary one night about Haitian children whose parents bring them to orphanages, and they're not necessarily orphans because they have parents who visit them, and so Claire came about, I think, when I heard one of the people in the documentary say something like, oh, these people, they're able to do that because they're not like us, they're not as attached to their children, and this luminous character just emerged, and as you know, sometimes even in reading but also in writing, some characters reveal themselves to you whole. So the character comes with just like fully formed, but other characters you have to pursue, and I think maybe out of the rage of that moment, Claire kind of emerged, and then just in placing her setting and following her around, there's then this image of this town also emerged. But it's a character that I grew very attached to after a while, and I think it's because I also have a daughter that same age, and it was really the first time I was writing fiction. My daughter was born in 2005. I started that book late 2005, and I think it was also a way for me of exploring what it's like to be a parent, and just like all the fears that one has about ways that you can let your child down, and I had also had a childhood in which my parents were physically absent. They had my mother and father had moved to New York to work and left me in Haiti with my aunt and uncle. So I spent most of my childhood without them. So I think part of that, writing the book, was also standing in that middle place and examining what it's like to do, to be in that situation, both from the point of view of a parent, but also from the point of view of a child.
And you detail your story that you just described in your memoir. The title is just escaping me.
Brother, I'm Dying.
Brother, I'm Dying. Yes,
Yeah.
fantastic book. You know, Edwige, you're part of a cohort of immigrant writers who have burst onto the American consciousness in the past 20 years. I mean, in the previous generation, there were notable immigrant writers, Bharati Mukherjee, Amy Tan, but your generation, Junot Diaz, many others who are escaping me now, have really taken a strong and wide position in American letters. And you all know and support each other. Yeah.
Which we're lucky. I mean, I think even because we have such a broad sort of geographical range, but especially, you know, with some of us came of age in New York, but I think it's also, you're so right, that there was, that it seems like there's more of us now, but I think it's also important to pay homage to the generation that came before, because they were really opening a door that they were making the door, you know? And so I think Amy Tan effortlessly, you know, just by writing the Joy Luck Club, because publishing works like a lot like movies and other media, where people suddenly realize, oh, you know, they're reading, someone will read this, there's a readership for this, and then they'll go look for the writers, and then they'll look more closely. So that generation that came before, like Amy Tan, that they're still producing, Julia Alvarez and others who...
Esmeralda Santiago?
Yes,
yeah.
Absolutely. And they really opened this door by showing to the publishers and the gatekeepers that there is interest in this kind of literature. So that, yeah, I think the people who are coming, and then the people who are producing, and now we can have a really honest and maybe heated debate about what immigrant literature is, you know, from the whole range of it, from someone like Jhumpa Lahiri, who says there is no immigrant literature, that all you know, because there's no native literature, and she makes the case that you know, all literature is about sort of a stranger, someone who's a stranger in a new place, or a stranger in a new situation, which I think is a very valid place. So now we can even get to the point where we're having that type of conversation is amazing.
You know, it can be said that Philip Roth is an immigrant writer, because he wrote a lot about his father.
Exactly.
During a time when Jews were still discriminated against.
Yeah, and then sort of he also wrote about the sort of the rebellion of the next generation, which is, I think, you know, it's sort of with these stories about people who are on their path to assimilation. There's the coming of age, you know, and then there's the rebellion, and he's gone through that whole range of that through old age, which I think is powerful. If you look at his work, you could see like the whole process of becoming American, if you will.
Yeah. You write in English. Are you translated into Creole? Are you available in Haiti?
Yes, my books are available in Haiti, not in Creole, unfortunately, not yet, but they're translated into French and France. But we've also there was a program in Haiti. Actually, I just met someone who works at in the book fair that there is there. But in what they do for that book fair and for other events is that they'll make in addition, that's made by the National Library, a very cheap edition of a writer who is willing. So my books are distributed that way, so they're very inexpensive, but in French, and we're still working on ways to make them more available in Creole.
Okay. Do you want to tell us the identity of the model on the jacket of your book?
Oh, well, the cover girl on Claire of the Sealet is my daughter, Mira. A friend of mine, well, actually a local photographer called Juice, who was a photographer for the Miami Herald, who was a family friend, took that picture, and when I sent it to my publisher, they loved it. It seemed like a fitting cover.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. Yeah. Edwige Danticat, the new book is Claire of the Sea Light. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.